We're live in 5, 4, 3.
Good morning and welcome to Beyond the Charter. I'm Elizabeth Derricott.
And I'm Carly Collette. In terms of the simply terrifying reveal of the CIA interrogation tactics, former Vice President Dick Cheney stated he would, quote, do it all again. CNN's Sarah Fisher reports.
Talking about the release of the CIA torture report by the Democrats, and of course former Vice President Dick Cheney has been one of the biggest proponents of this program, and he talked about it again today, right?
Anna, he was on NBC's Meet the Press, and he staunchly defended the Bush administration's enhanced interrogation techniques. Listen here to him defend that program.
There's this notion that somehow there's moral equivalence between what the terrorists did and what we do, and that's absolutely not true. We were very careful to stop short of torture. The Senate has seen fit to label their report torture, but we worked hard to stay short of that definition. It worked. It worked now for 13 years. We've avoided another mass casualty attack against the United States. We did capture bin Laden. We did capture an awful lot of the senior guys of al-Qaeda who were responsible for that attack on 9/11. I'd do it again in a minute.
And he slammed the report as partisan. He said that it was not done well and it was not done thoroughly, Anna.
On a more positive note, a program called Moms Helping Moms, created by Bridget Cutler, is helping moms that are struggling to give them the things that they need to support their kids.
Rewarding thing I've ever experienced. On the flip side, the financial burden of having a child is just tremendous. So many people have such an abundance, and so many others strive to afford even the basics. All right, who wants to water? I remember reading an article, and it was about a mother who decided to give her child up for adoption because she couldn't stand to hear her crying from hunger. So here's Declan's baby book. I just thought that no mother should ever be faced with that choice. So that was when I decided that I needed to do something. I started to collect excess baby gear, and that was when Moms Helping Moms was born. Boys' clothes are up to the right, girls' clothes are to the left. We have drives at our storage space. We like to call them shopping days because they are essentially shopping. They're just not paying anything for it.
This is really cool.
They're awesome.
I've been out of work for about 10 months. New clothes, diapers, and wipes. They're a constant expense.
These are just great. Just take one more.
It was hard to afford the things that I needed for my kids without an income. Thank God. Yes. The things that I got today will allow me to put that money towards my rent or my bills.
Yeah. Every child deserves a fair start, and if what we're doing helps bridge the gap between people from different backgrounds, even in a small way, then it's definitely worth all the hard work.
As it tries to recover from a devastating cyber attack, Sony Pictures is asking news organizations, including CNN, to stop examining any publicizing and corporate secrets that hackers have made public.
Like to live in a world with no secrets. It sure does feel like we're getting a preview of that. Consider all of the details that poured forth this week about the U.S. government's torture of prisoners after 9/11. Also consider the awful stories being told by Bill Cosby's accusers now that they feel comfortable sharing them. And consider this, the extraordinary and devastating cyber attack directed at Sony Pictures, airing so much dirty laundry from that studio, with many now wondering how the company will ever recover. Private emails, salaries, social security numbers, it's been a mountain of private information dumped onto the internet by hackers. Why? Well, many are pointing to North Korea as the source of the hack, potentially in retaliation for this Sony movie, The Interview, about two goofy reporters who want to interview leader Kim Jong-un.
You two are going to be in a room alone with Kim, and the CIA would love it if you could take him out. Take him out.
For coffee? Dinner? For kimchi?
No, take him out.
You want us to kill the leader of North Korea?
Yes.
This hacking happened a couple of weeks ago, but the leaks keep coming. And one Sony executive told me he considers what has happened to be a terrorist attack that serious for his company. The thing is, there's been a lot of gossipy revelations, lots of leaks, but also real damage done. Look at this exchange that came out a few days ago. This is between powerful producer Scott Rudin and the head of the studio, Amy Pascal, about President Obama. It seems like there's clear racial overtones here. Pascal says, should I ask him if he liked Django? Rudin responds, 12 Years a Slave. Pascal wrote back, The Butler. Now, they have both apologized, but anger over the tone of the exchanges continues to mount. And for me, this story got personal this week when I discovered that some of my private emails to sources at Sony were among all the now public, now leaked files. Now, none of my communications were embarrassing, but it does not feel good to know that now the world can see who my sources were. So there's that, and there's also the fallout in Hollywood, because that has been immense. Look at this picture of Angelina Jolie greeting or not greeting the Sony chief I was just talking about, Amy Pascal. This picture was taken right after the revelations of an email between Pascal and Rudin in which Rudin called Jolie a minimally talented, spoiled brat. And then, as we talk about these, there are ethical considerations here. This is stolen material. So should journalists like I and many others simply feel free to republish something that was taken illegally? With me now to discuss all of that, Andrew Wallenstein, the co-editor-in-chief of Variety, and here in New York, CNN's own Don Lemon. Don, usually you're the one interviewing me. I decided it'd be fun to flip the table around this time. And I'm interested in hearing your reaction to those emails I was reading, talking about President Obama, all referring to films with African-American themes.
I didn't find it funny, obviously. I hate to call people's actions racist. They were certainly racially insensitive, and I think it really makes the point of what Chris Rock has said about Hollywood when he wrote the essay saying Hollywood is a white industry and it has a racial problem. It certainly does, and this highlights it.
So we see documentary evidence of it in a way we rarely see.
Right, because, I mean, think about those are antiquated conversations that they were having. You would think that was back in the 1930s or 40s or 50s when people would talk in that manner.
Andrew, what has the fallout been in Hollywood?
This is all anyone is talking about. It's just amazing. And, you know, you have to wonder about the executives at the center of this, how this is going to impact their future. You know, what we talked about with regarding Obama is one thing, but when you're talking about people like Angelina Jolie, Adam Sandler, Kevin Hart, you know, this is going to impact this studio going forward. Their ability to get the biggest stars in their projects, you better believe there's going to be some impact.
That's interesting to hear you say that. You know, part of me thinks that, and Don, tell me what you think of this. Part of me thinks this is Hollywood, this is how things are. Everybody in Hollywood knows it, but now we are seeing it, and that's what's new. Maybe they all know it's a nasty business.
People are a commodity in Hollywood. That's what you're selling, a personality. So you're going to talk about people as if they are products.
Andrew, do you think there will be a price to pay for Sony Pictures in particular? Will some talent choose, you know, not to enter into these relationships with them in the future?
Oh, it's quite possible. You know, let's not forget, you know, certain stars probably have very fragile egos, probably had no idea that some of the comments that came out of these emails were what the executives they were thinking, that what the executives they were dealing with were thinking. So, you know, I'm not saying that Sony's going out of business now or something like that, but you better believe every star and their representatives are going to think twice.
Yeah. Andrew, you wrestled with this for days, this issue of whether to publish this content. It's been on my mind as well. You actually wrote about it for Variety. Why do you think it is journalistically defensible to be quoting from these very private emails?
Well, a very tough decision for us, one we made with a very heavy heart. On the one hand, I don't like being treated as a pawn by the hackers, which I believe is really what's gone on here. And, you know, it's also, let's not forget, people are drawing comparison to something like Edward Snowden. This is not information that had to come out for the public good.
That's right.
I think that is a false equivalency. But ultimately, the decision lies in the fact that regardless of whether Variety would have abstained or not, dozens of publications were talking about this. Blogs, the most reputable publications around. It was amplified by social media. We had some of the most powerful people in Hollywood calling us this week, talking about it constantly, some pressuring us not to do this. Yeah. But, you know, my prime directive as the editor-in-chief of Variety is to stay relevant, to be talking about the things that everyone in the business are talking about.
When you say
ultimately, that's what tipped my hand.
When you say some of them were pressuring you, were folks from Sony calling you?
No. Folks from Sony were not doing anything pressuring like that.
But it does do a service, I have to say, because it exposes a lack of diversity in Hollywood, and that Hollywood, again, does have a race problem. And I think when you put it there, barefaced for people to see, they have to deal with it. So I think it does a service in some way by publishing them.
One of the other justifications of putting these out there, I think the very first publication of any of these documents was from Fusion, the website owned by Univision and Disney. And their justification was they were showing the executive salaries and how almost all of the top executives at Sony Pictures are white men, as is the case in many other parts of the media industry, but they were singling out Sony because they had very detailed data they could point to. And one of the points Fusion has made, and I'll read from it, it says, from the beginning, the Sony Pictures hackers clearly saw journalists as part of their toolkit, which gets to what you were saying, Andrew. You don't want to be a pawn for these anonymous hackers. At the same time, there is newsworthy content now out in the public domain.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, we've done their bidding. We've maximized the exposure to this content. And
Stay with us. When we return, we take a look at Bill Cosby at home.
Bill Cosby, accused of rape and other misdeeds by an increasing number of women, was reached at home on Friday by a freelance reporter from New York Post.
He was America's dad. Everybody loved him. I loved him. I wanted him to be my dad. He asked me back a few times. He asked me to visit him on the set. I was not the only girl that he was doing this with.
Mr. Cosby wanted me to come down for an audition for the Bill Cosby Show.
I'm going to offer you a part on The Cosby Show. He had been mentoring me and grooming me.
He said, well, come up to my bungalow after I'm finished shooting and we'll work on it.
So he asked me, he says, before we go out to dinner, would you like a cocktail?
Had 1 glass of wine with dinner.
He made me a drink.
He said, oh, I've got something for that, and he gave me a pill. It was red wine, it was a pill.
He opened up a briefcase that was on his front seat, and it was filled with different assorted pills.
This men's shaving kit opened up with lots of pills.
Why don't you take a couple of these to help you relax?
I took 1 sip, and I felt something very strange going on in my head.
I began to feel very, very, very drugged.
He drugged me and my roommate.
I knew I had been drugged. It was very powerful. It came on very quickly.
And very shortly after that, I passed out.
The last thing I remember, I had blacked out, and Cosby mounting me.
She passed out, and I pulled him off of her.
The room started to spin. My speech was slurred.
And before I knew it, I was with my head over the toilet, throwing up, in a white T-shirt and my panties, and he was looming over me in a white robe.
I woke up, or came to, very groggily with him removing my underwear.
The next thing I knew, it was 4 o'clock in the morning. I woke up in a bed, naked, bruised.
There was a lot of pain downstairs. There was semen all over me, and that my pajamas bottoms were off. I woke up out of a very confused state, and knowing that my body had been touched without my permission.
I knew I was raped.
I was embarrassed, and at that point, fight or flight, I just packed up and I got the hell out of there.
But who's going to believe me? Bill Cosby, the all-American dad, the all-American husband, the person, Mr. Jello, that everybody loves.
Cosby was a very powerful man. I was looked at directly in the eye by Bill Cosby and said, I had better never, ever see your face or hear your name again. And I listened.
A monthly shipment by the company Faithbox has been promoting religious living, as well as reminding people of the meaning of this time of year. Fox spoke with the company's CEO.
To the meaning of Christmas, but here's one gift idea to remind you of the season's true meaning. It's called Faithbox.
Well, joining us now to explain is the founder and CEO of Faithbox, Willie Morris. Thanks for being with us.
Hey Willie, nice to see you.
So you can have all sorts of subscriptions that you give somebody for Christmas, whether it's a wine subscription, magazine subscription, but this is for faith. How does it work?
It is. So every month we ship out our box. Every box is around a specific theme, specific Christian theme, and then in every box we have kind of a mixture of a few things. We have
biblical quotes.
We have these cards which are like inspirations, reflections. So everything from quotes or Bible verses or just scripture, and we also have actions in those. So take a few minutes out of your day and buy lunch for someone or just random acts of kindness.
And what I love about the idea behind it, it's not about making money, but you partnered with a company that really helps children and feed needy children. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So the idea is that we'll have a charitable partner every few months. Right now we're working with rice bowls. So for every box that we ship, we actually make sure an orphan child has food for a day, which is kind of awesome.
Your story is interesting too because you weren't really a believer.
That's true.
And something changed in you. You were an atheist at one point.
I was.
And now you're a believer. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, I grew up. I went to Catholic school. Did all that good stuff in Virginia, and then I went down to the dirty South in Alabama, where I went to college, War Eagle. And I just kind of was exposed to a very different type of Christianity, where some of it was a little heavy-handed. It didn't really fit with what my idea of Christianity was. And so I kind of went the other way. And as a college kid, you always go to extremes. So I went completely atheist until I was in Florida and kind of slowly found my way back, but in a very different way, more through reflections and acts and kind of trying to live it out day to day instead of how I grew up.
Yeah, well, it's pretty bold to come up with a company based upon your faith, right? How has that been working out for you?
It's been great. It's definitely been a journey. For such a long time, I never talked about my own faith, my own religious background. So now doing something that kind of gives back a little positivity in the world, hopefully, has been really exciting.
Yeah.
A little scary.
A lot of positive actions in here, and I even see some dark chocolate in here.
Oh,
yeah, lemon ginger, dark chocolate with black pepper.
We're going to have to dig into that. And you actually have an amazing special for our viewers, too. Thank you so much, Willie. Go to foxandfriends.com, and you can find out about all this. But it's Fox14 is the promo code, and you can get 10% off any purchase at Faithbox.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah,
Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas.
A man who says he was molested by Jerry Sandusky filed a private criminal complaint in Pennsylvania, trying to force prosecutors to reopen their investigation into the more formal to take him to trial once again.
Former Penn State assistant football coach Jerry Sandusky on charges based on the claims of two new accusers. NBC's national investigative correspondent Michael Isikoff has the latest on this story. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Ann. For the first time, Jerry Sandusky spent the night in jail. His attorney hopes to post a $250,000 cash bail and get him out later this morning. But if he does, he'll have to wear an electronic monitor under house arrest as his case proceeds to court. Without warning, state police arrested Jerry Sandusky at his house on new charges of child sex abuse. Wearing handcuffs under a Penn State tracksuit, Sandusky is now accused of abusing two more boys, both between the ages of 10 and 12 at the time of the assaults. Prosecutors say one series of assaults started 14 years ago. All total, 10 boys have now alleged abuse by Sandusky. The latest charges involve an accuser identified as Victim 9, and maybe the most shocking yet. In a new grand jury report, Victim 9 claims that after meeting Sandusky at his Second Mile charity summer camp, the former Penn State defensive coach gave the boy gifts and money and invited him for sleepovers at the Sandusky house. Sandusky started out with hugging, rubbing, cuddling, and tickling, he says, and then escalated to sexual assaults. Many of the alleged sexual assaults, at least 16 according to the grand jury, took place in the basement of Sandusky's home. When the boy would come over, he says Sandusky would tell him to stay in the basement unless otherwise directed. He ate meals there, and Sandusky would bring him the food. The grand jury report says the victim claims during one assault, quote, he screamed for help, knowing that Sandusky's wife was upstairs, but no one ever came to help him. Sandusky is accused of abusing victim 9 from 2005 to 2008, which means the abuse started 3 years after the grand jury says Penn State officials were told about Sandusky allegedly assaulting another boy in a campus locker room shower. And Sandusky is now charged with sexual abuse occurring as early as 1997. Victim 10 also says he met Sandusky through the second mile and was invited to Penn State football games. He says Sandusky wrestled with him in his basement and sexually assaulted him. Victim 10 says Sandusky grabbed his privates while swimming in the outdoor pool on campus. The victim says Sandusky gave him gifts and frequently told the boy that he loved him. For his part, Sandusky has insisted he never sexually assaulted anyone, his lawyer objecting to the unannounced arrest at Sandusky's home.
Certainly would have turned himself in today. So the question begs to be asked, why would the Attorney General's office decide not to tell me who they knew I was his attorney and why to go to his house and take him out in handcuffs?
Prosecutors say both of these new victims came forward after the original charges were filed last month. Now, Sandusky is due to appear in court next Tuesday, and prosecutors say the investigation is still underway.
When we return, a 17-year-old's supposed suicide may be a murder.
Local North Carolina police ruled this hanging as suicide, but the 17-year-old's mother seems to think otherwise. ABC's Ron Claiborne brings insight to the FBI investigation.
Of a 17-year-old football player. Local officials ruled it a suicide, but the boy's mom says she knew there were signs something was wrong the minute she saw his body. Here's ABC's Ron Claiborne with the details.
We will not rest.
Today, a march through the streets of Bladenboro, North Carolina, by protesters demanding to know how Lennon Lacey, a promising 17-year-old athlete, died. Last August, the football player left home to go for a walk. The next morning, Lacey was found hanging from a playground swing in a predominantly white trailer park.
I need EMS. I have a man hanging from a swing set.
Police ruled his death a suicide, but Lacey's family refused to believe that. His mother and brother spoke about it to Yahoo's Katie Couric.
He didn't do this to himself.
He was just too happy for life. He just wanted life.
Their fear that Lacey may have been murdered, possibly the victim of a racial hate crime.
We know it was a hanging. And the question is, was it a suicidal hanging? Was it a staged hanging?
Lacey's family has raised some troubling questions. How did the 5'9" Lacey reach the 7.5-foot high bar? Why would he kill himself? And they say the belt that he used was not his. They told Katie Couric not even the shoes he was wearing when his body was found were his.
We knew that those weren't the shoes he had on his feet because his sister saw him with those Jordans on when he left.
And what about the shoes that he was wearing when he was found?
We don't know where those shoes came from.
Those questions now getting the scrutiny of the FBI, which will conduct its own investigation into the mystery of what happened to Lennon Lacey that hot summer night. Ron Claiborne, ABC News, New York.
Have arrested DeAndre Hart, 22, in connection with the shooting death of a freshman Auburn University football player. The Auburn Police Division said in a news release yesterday.
Approximately 25 minutes after midnight, the Auburn Police Division responded to the 200 block of West Longleaf Drive in reference to a shooting call. Upon arrival, we were informed that there was one victim of the shooting. We've identified that person as 18-year-old Jaquel Leonard Mitchell of Opelika, Alabama. He is deceased at this time, and we're investigating this as a homicide. We're asking anyone that has information about this crime to contact the Auburn Police Division. The detective section's number is 334-501-3140, and they can reach the anonymous tip line at 334-246-1391.
A daring jailbreak in Alabama has many towns on edge. Not one, but 3 escapees on the loose. 2 were found, but the accused murderer is not. ABC's Gio Benitez with the story.
Around that Alabama jail on edge this weekend as investigators hunt down those 3 inmates who overpowered their guard in the middle of the night. ABC's Gio Benitez with the details.
Tonight, a desperate nationwide search is underway for an accused murderer after police say he and 2 others escaped from this small Alabama jail early Saturday morning.
These individuals are extremely dangerous.
Over 100 investigators on the ground, combing through surveillance videos, piecing together where the inmates went. Police using dogs to sniff out their initial trail, but only a quarter of a mile later, it went cold.
We feel either they had a vehicle or someone came and picked them up.
Police say the elaborate plot to escape began with one of the men appearing ill.
Justin Gordon was vomiting profusely.
The 3 had been sharing a cell awaiting trial, the illness prompting a guard to check through the cell's porthole. But when he opened the door, one of the inmates quickly fled by foot, while the other 2 stole the guard's keys and cell phones. Then they put a cloth over the jailer's face and sprayed it with cleaning chemicals, knocking him out. The 3 inmates exited the jail right through the front door. Then a break, the tip line ringing off the hook in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, about 23-year-old Justin Terrell Gordon, charged with burglary and armed robbery. Investigators tracking Gordon for hours, apprehending him in this movie theater parking lot 2 hours away. And today, another break. Accused murderer Jamail Colbert was caught at his grandmother's house 36 miles from that county jail. Still on the run, this man, Colbert's cousin, accused murderer DeMarcus Woodard. Tonight, police alerting the families of the alleged victims, urging residents to be on high alert.
I have a pistol and I'm armed and ready.
And tonight it appears the 3 men had separated as soon as they escaped. In fact, U.S. Marshals spotted one of the inmates on surveillance video walking around a mall. So, Tom, right now, this guy can be anywhere. So people have to be careful.
Yeah, walking around the mall. Hard to believe. Yep. Okay, Gio, thank you so much.
Dorian Johnson, who was walking with Michael Brown before Officer Darren Wilson fatally shot Brown in August, told remarkable similar stories in an interview with county and federal authorities in August and in testimony to the grand jury in September.
To Michael Brown's death, the trove includes the transcript of an interview that Dorian Johnson, the friend who was with Brown when he was killed by an officer, that one that he had with the FBI days after the shooting. Now, that interview is consistent with others Johnson did, including testifying before the grand jury. In them, Johnson says Officer Darren Wilson grabbed Michael Brown, that Brown was shot while running away from Wilson, and that Brown's hands were up when he was shot. But while Johnson's story has been consistent, that's not always the case with other eyewitnesses.
Now, while a lot of witnesses obviously do their best to tell the Ferguson grand jury what they remembered, it does appear that there were also some who may have simply lied. There's a story this morning on CNN.com that looks at specific parts of his testimony.
Yeah, CNN's Josh Levs is overseeing a team that's sifting through the thousands of pages of the document so far. What are you finding?
Well, some of these people admit it. Some of these people actually got up there in front of the grand jury and said, yeah, I lied. Or at partway through their testimony ended up saying, okay, I was lying to you before this. And as we've been piecing through this, we've been putting together a series of stories that we're going to start to release in the coming days. But I can tell you right now, the first one is out this morning. It's on CNN.com right now. And what we are looking at is a series of people who were brought forward to the Ferguson grand jury only so that it could be proven that they had no credibility, either because they were lying straight up or because their credibility was so severely damaged in other ways. The Ferguson grand jury sat through hours of testimony that was not helpful in trying to figure out what may or may not have happened. And let me give you all a couple examples here. We're going to start with witness number 35, who gave all these dramatic descriptions. These are people on both sides. This was someone who was very much from the pro-Michael Brown contingent. So he gave all these dramatic descriptions, and then a grand juror asks him at one point in his testimony, when it all starts to fall apart, the juror says, "Are you telling us that the only thing that's true about all of your statements before this is that you saw that police officer shoot him at point-blank range?" And he says yes. So he acknowledges everything he had said up to that point was totally false. Now, here's someone on the other side, someone who was very pro-Officer Wilson, has actually created a group to support him. She gives all these fantastic descriptions, and then it starts to fall apart until the prosecutor asks her, Is it possible, do you think, that you just dreamed about this after it happened and it feels real to you, that you were up there? And she says, I never dreamed about it. But she's an example of someone who has no credibility, because by the time they've gotten to that point in her testimony, they've established that she's running a pro-Wilson group. She posted a racist rant on the day that it happened. There's no sign that her car was ever even there. She's on some kind of medication, and she has memory problems. So what we have found is a series of witnesses, not the majority, but people who were brought forward and factually were not helpful to any grand jurors in trying to figure out what could have happened.
Okay, so I have to ask you, why were some of these people brought into the grand jury? Was it just so the grand jury could say, listen, we covered all our bases?
That's quite possible. You know, I've been asking our legal teams about this. Why would you take hours of time for these people when it's clearly not helpful testimony in that respect? Right. So you have these two contingents. You have this one side, like Sonny Hostin, one of our legal analysts, who feel that they wanted to give a big, jumbled, confusing case to the grand jury, because if they did that, then there's a good chance that Wilson would be exonerated. But then there's another contingent that says that they knew that there would be a federal investigation, there would be all this scrutiny afterwards, there would be all these people looking into it, and they wanted to be able to say, we tossed everything at the grand jury, everything we heard, anything from anyone, we put it all out there. So, you know, there are these two different predominant theories as to why it happened, but what's not in doubt is that a lot of people, well, a series of people were brought in here that...
Thank you for joining us on Beyond the Charter. That's all for today. All videos displayed in today's show are gathered from news stations around the country via the internet and are displayed with no copyright infringement intended.
Follow us on social media at Beyond the Charter for updates, and drop us an email about a story from the country you'd like to see. Bring the branch at wfbnn.info@gmail.com. Subject hashtag Beyond the Charter.
Until tomorrow, I'm Carly Collette.
And I'm Elizabeth Erica.
Have a great day, Falcons.
We're live in 5, 4, 3.